Hello, my name is Matthew, and this morning I read The Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka, translated by Willa and Edwin Muir. I've read this short story several times. The first time I read it, I remember being quite surprised that after the fantastical and famous opening passage of Gregory Samsa overnight being transformed into a large insect. Right after that, the whole rest of the story is about domestic affairs, household finances, worries about work, dining, and that's almost the whole entire story. And the, my first impression years and years ago was what a strange combination of fantastical and mundane. And upon each reading throughout the years, the story became more and more terrifying. And I'm hoping that this morning's reading will be the end of this transformation, because it was as if I was reading a waking nightmare. Gregory Samsa wakes up as an insect one morning. He's on his back and he looks down and sees two rows of thin, long legs moving wildly and without his control. He realizes his situation, and the first thing that he thinks is, I'm late for work. He laments his job, but his household, his mother and father and sister rely on him. Never mind that he's an insect. He's worried about his boss being upset with him, losing his job, and he goes right into denial. He's going to just try to get out of bed. He's late getting up, obviously, and there begins to be a series of knocks at his door. His mother first, and then later on his father. And almost as if when we begin this story, his transformation isn't quite over. At first, his mother and father can understand him. And as the morning goes along, he becomes less and less comprehensible. And then when we're into the story, he no longer has a human voice at all. Instead, it's just the screechings of a terrifying insect. His boss, his supervisor, comes to the house and knocks on the door and talks to the parents outside. Everyone is worried, and they're making up excuses and explanations that he wasn't feeling well and that he's dizzy. They feel as if Gregor in his bedroom is being rude and irresponsible. Finally, they get the door open, and it is revealed to everyone the circumstances that they've all now found themselves in. A man has been transformed into a cockroach or some vermin. The mother and father and sister realize this. The supervisor is aghast. He runs for the door. The cockroach, Gregor, understanding the risk of him leaving and telling people that he's an insect, instead he wants to tell him, like, as soon as I get better, I'm going to go back to work. Don't tell my boss. I don't want to lose my job. And he runs after him. There's a misunderstanding between the terrifying nature of his movements and body and his intentions. Supervisor squeals in terror and runs out the door. Gregor gets locked in his door. Gregor gets locked into his room. He can hear his parents and sister outside. They're in denial. They are not asking what happened or anything like that. Instead, they go straight into pragmatism. How are we going to pay our bills? How are we going to live? What do we feed? What do we do? What do we do? And that's it. It's just, we need to live, we need to eat. How are we going to survive? Gregor is now in quarantine. He's locked into his room, trying to reconcile this terrible situation that he's now in. Doesn't understand what happened and doesn't know what the next step is. What is the next thing to do? He wakes up later on. He falls asleep after this frightful episode. He's exhausted, and when he wakes up, he sees that there's a bowl of milk and bread left for him. He knows that his sister left it for him, and he finds that the milk, which used to be his favorite drink, is now suddenly unappetizing. He doesn't touch it. His sister realizes this the next day and puts out scraps of food, rotten cheeses and bones that have marrow on them. And he learns that he has different tastes than he did. His sister begins to take care of him, and Gregor, understanding that he's horrifying to look at, will hide at certain times of the day so she can come in and clean up his scraps of food and put out more food and fresh water. This goes along. Gregor spends his time looking out the window. There's a hospital across the street. He finds that he can crawl up the walls and on the ceiling. His sister sees sticky spots all over and understands that he's enjoying his new activity. He has something that he can do to occupy his time. She has her mother, the sister asks the mother to come in. She can't look at him. It's too much for her. And they try to remove furniture to make it easier for him to climb the walls since he's an insect. And the mother says, well, isn't this going to be upsetting? We're now treating him as his cockroach, but what happens when he turns back into my son? And Gregor, who's an insect, has a revelation, and it was a revelation that came from his mother's words. He was already losing his humanity, forgetting that he was a person. He was hoping they would take the furniture out so he can climb the walls and hang from the ceiling. They take a dresser out, and there's a picture on the wall that he doesn't want them to remove, so he scuttles out of his hiding spot, goes up the wall to protect this picture. Of course, the sister is now seeing a full view of him, and the mother, who just can't stand the sight of him, are shocked. The mother faints at this. Gregor runs over as a good son to maybe help his mother, not momentarily forgetting how nightmarish he looks. It's misunderstood, and it causes more consternation. The father gets home. The sister says he's loose, and they have fights to get him back into his little room. More and more they learn to accept him and ignore him. Finally, they neglect him. He's treated more as if he's an inert pet hermit crab that you only have to think about once a day. They stop cleaning his room. They all have gone off and gotten new jobs. They bring in boarders to make more money for the house. And they resent him. He causes a scene where the boarders see him. He comes out because his sister is playing the violin, and he just wanted to be close to her. The boarders are just outraged and insulted. They're going to leave. They're going to lose this money. There's going to be rumors through the town. The sister says, this can't go on. This isn't My brother, this isn't your son. We've been fooling ourselves for too long. We need to get rid of him. I say, well, what does that mean? Gregor scuttles back into his isolated, dark room, and he dies. They find him the next morning. He had been starving. He was injured. And they're shaken by this, just ashen with this episode that they can't explain. They had to try to keep living their lives, and they're going to move on. Throughout all of this, the sister who, at the beginning of this story, was a young girl, has also transformed into a young lady. And after this tragedy, she's going to move on, and they're all going to move on. It's a terrifying, really thought-provoking story. The more that I've read it, the more relatable so many of these just matter-of-fact details and responsibilities of what it's like to be a responsible adult, and what it's like to deal with tragedies and disasters and events that are outside of your control and that you can't explain. How do you go on from there? What do you do? It's incredibly moving. So that's it. I'm sure this is a story a lot of you have read. It's obviously a very famous story. Let me know your thoughts. So leave a comment if you would like, and thank you for watching.